Welcome to the 74th episode of the GameFor Podcast. In this episode, we'll talk about what things make us interested in a new tabletop game. I'm Adam.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor Podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called MilkCan. And because most of the folks at MilkCan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and the web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more of your tabletop gaming.
Yes, soon.
I sound weird, I think, because my cold. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I've come back from Adepticon with a cold, and it's better, but
Because you didn't wear a mask.
That's true. It's true.
I know. The con crud is back.
Yeah, you didn't come back with anything, did you?
No, I did not for this one.
I mean, you came back with stuff. You just didn't come back with
Yeah, I didn't come back with gold.
Yeah. So how did you enjoy Adepticon?
So I was down there for, I guess technically 2 days, but I only was there at the show for a day. But it was good. It was nice kind of seeing everything back. It was interesting seeing Golden Demon being there for the first time for me.
Yeah. Well, they never had the Golden Demon there before, so.
Okay. I knew
they
it
were
was
gonna in 2020. That was the first time it was starting.
Okay. I knew it was returned to the States, but I wasn't sure where it was before.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. The dealer hall was quite a bit larger.
Yeah, I think the dealer hall did seem to be bigger this year. I'm pretty sure of it.
There was a lot of stuff. Like I know for a fact I missed like a few booths, even though I felt like I went up and down the aisles multiple times. So
I think that as you got back towards that big GW booth in the back, it was a weird layout, and there were times if you tried to walk around, or there was a line of people, and then you would miss a booth. And I probably felt bad for those people whose booth that was.
And I think that there was a less definition between booths too, which was kind of weird.
In some places, yeah.
So it seemed like one kind of ran into another. And there were places where people were sharing, so it was hard to know where some places were actually different booths and where were just kind of continuations.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But yeah, I picked up some new games, which one of the things that kind of made me think of the topic today. Got more of the MDF,
yep.
Yeah, base plates from Gale Force 9.
Yep. If you've ever been to a convention before where Gale Force 9 is there, specifically, well, I don't know if they do it at Gen Con too, but I know they do it at Adepticon. It's always, they bring these big bins full of different sized basing for, you can use it for miniatures, you can use it for terrain stuff, you can use it for all kinds of things, but it's cut out of thin MDF, and then you fill up a Chinese takeout box full of ones. The white paper ones. You fill those up with as many bases as you can fit in there, and then you pay what was it, like $5 or something like that?
It's 15 for a pint and 20 for a quart, I think.
Okay, yeah.
And then and they are not stingy about it. Like they'll many times be like, "No, you didn't pack that full enough."
You can fit more in there.
You can almost close the top of that, so you didn't do it right.
Yeah. No, that is. I don't know why I'm very particular about my bases, so I don't seem to use those myself, but I have purchased them before for objective markers and terrain basing and stuff like that, but I didn't buy any this year though. I did go by and smell real hard though, because it's all laser cut MDF, so it smells like burnt wood, and it's kind of nice. Not so bad.
Yeah. No, I had first done it my first Adepticon
2018, 17?
Something like that. Yeah, Lee Gaddis was like, "Oh yeah, you should go get those to base his Shattered Crown stuff in."
Yeah.
And that kind of got me into using that for anything that didn't come with its own base. And I have since gone into a rationing of stuff because I was low.
Well, yeah, and there was no conventions to go fill up. Yeah, exactly.
3 years of not being able to buy it. So, I loaded back up on stuff, especially the ones that I knew I used a lot more than others. And yeah, it's I like it because it's a nice firm thing. You've got to be a little careful because that first layer will soak in glue and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing about MDF is that it's super important to kind of try to seal it, especially with the terrain too. If you decide you want to paint it, You do have to try to figure out a way to sort of seal it, because otherwise, if you put paint on it, it'll just soak into it like a sponge.
But yeah, for like cost, I mean, I probably got a few hundred bases now that's in a box that for $20. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I did that, and then let's see, I ran a demo for Mr. Gaddis. I think
Gaddis Gaming?
Yeah, we did Shattered Crown. He was going to do Empire Falls, but I think he did do some Empire Falls, but I wasn't there for that.
Yeah, the Shattered Crown is the alternate history World War I stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So this was the first time for me to run a demo at a convention, like officially.
Yeah.
Like, I think I've helped run stuff before, but never like, hey, somebody signed up for the demo and you're the one running it. So,
Yeah.
it was a little nerve-wracking because I hadn't played the game in probably 2 years because it's, but yeah, once I got into it, it went well, and I think the other person had a good time. And
nice.
So, yeah, it was fun. It was fun to just game again and see other people gaming and walking around enjoying stuff and talking.
Yeah. Did you buy anything? I mean, besides bases?
Yes, I bought lots of stuff.
Yeah.
The bases. I bought some paints. I don't think you can get out of there without buying paints.
Well, yeah,
it's kind of
generally
a requirement.
It's true.
And then I bought a new game called Don't Look Back, which is a horror themed game.
It's a horror themed miniatures game from Blacksite Studios.
Yep. So it's very interesting to me. It's
co-op, right?
Yes,
because you're basically like
against the killer.
Yeah, there's like some sort of killer, like a Jason or a Freddy or some other kind of off-brand.
And that's the thing
killer.
is it definitely goes on the horror tropes. And
yeah, exactly.
It's kind of got some tongue-in-cheek stuff in it.
But that figure is controlled by the game, right?
Yes.
So you and the other players are all trying to not die.
Correct.
Kind of thing, right? Yeah. Which I think is an interesting concept for. You mean, like, so many miniatures games are just like, here's a military action, or here, whatever.
Right.
And this is, I think, interesting because it's a miniatures game, but it's different. I mean, there's video games that are doing that now. It kind of reminds
me of like Betrayal, but without someone just randomly getting thrown into it, and having kind of that more strategic, open world aspect feel of a miniatures versus a board game.
Blacksite Studios has been doing some really interesting things. They've got this game. They've got another game called Lunar, which is all about basically skirmishes on the moon.
Yep.
And then there's also another game they've got called Violent Dark, which is maybe a little bit more of a slightly standardized kind of like Space Hulk kind of Aliens kind of sort of deal, but it's still cool that they're doing a bunch of different things like that. I think that's neat.
Yeah, I picked up some miniatures for my daughter who loves Stranger Things. I believe they were called like the 80s Kids or something because they had fun names for stuff because they obviously couldn't use the official commercial names, but you could definitely tell what they were from. Like the meddling kids is these, the Mystery
Scooby Squad or whatever.
Scooby Squad, yeah. And I also bought a house because they have basically pre-painted MDF terrain.
Yeah,
it's kind of like it's colored, like different sheets are colored differently.
They're colored differently. When you put them together, then it's almost as if the MDF is already kind of pre-painted.
Yeah,
I've used it before, and it's nice. I always like to go back with my airbrush a little bit and do a bit of weathering with like some either contrast paints or some speed paints or something like that.
Absolutely.
That's got like a transparent thing to it, and that helps too. But
this one's pretty cool because it's I bought the Bale Residence,
Baal, I believe, right? Yeah.
It's
like a big kind of mansion-y sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's cool because like each floor lifts off,
so you can like play inside the house and stuff.
Yeah, so you're playing inside the house, and like the floors actually have different textures for different wood flooring, and it's like the stairs. I was doing the stairs, and I'm like, oh, why, like it doesn't really have a back to the, like each stair didn't really have a back, but then I looked and I was like, oh wait, they left enough room so that when you're doing miniatures and they're going up the stairs,
then your base fits underneath the edge. Like, so you could stop on the staircase.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like really cool little design.
Everything
like
that I've ever used of theirs it's always worked real well. I've got a bunch of like concrete, like kind of beat up concrete walls made of MDF that work great, and I've been happy with their stuff.
Nice, but I'm planning on running because I've got a Pennywise miniature that I got from Monster Fight Club, about a year ago, I think, when they were first trying out their COcast.
Yeah, yes. The COcast stuff. Yeah.
Modeling. So I'm going to do that with this Resident and some other ideas I have, and running a demo of TMX that's going to be kind of it themed.
Tabletop Minions Expo, by the way, coming up June 4th and 5th. Go to tabletopminions.org/TMX for more information. Yay. Yeah, no, that'll be very cool. I'm looking forward to that, definitely.
How about yourself? You seemed like you were having a good time at Tabletop.
Yeah, I got there on Wednesday, right around lunchtime, maybe just a touch before lunch. We left kind of early. And then came home sometime late-ish in the evening on Sunday. So I was there a long time, talked to lots and lots and lots and lots of people. It was great to see everybody again. The masks were not required by the county or the state or whatever the deal was. That was kind of a late February sort of update that they'd made.
Yeah, you had to have a vaccine.
Yeah, you had to have proof of vaccination and everything like that. Yeah. And so there were people wearing
COVID test too.
Yeah, maybe, but it's one of those things where it's like you got to have a negative COVID test, but it's got to be within a certain amount of time. And a lot of time the PCR type, and a lot of times you're like, good luck getting your response quick enough, you know, or whatever. So it was predominantly the other stuff, and that was good. And some people did come away with COVID, as it turns out. That will probably happen for a long, long time in general at events. But I did not. I just came away. I did get tested when I got back, because I started feeling lousy on like Wednesday, and I was like, ugh. And then I got tested, and no, it wasn't COVID, just a bad cold, which I haven't had a cold in like two and a half years, really.
Yeah.
So I guess I was due. But otherwise, it was very good to see folks and to be able to touch base with folks and just have people come up and say hi and things like that. That was awesome. So yeah, did a lot of that. I filmed interviews with a bunch of painters. I made a video out of that went up last week on my channel.
Yeah, definitely go check that out if you haven't already.
And then I've also got another video that I'm going to do that's going to be, I interviewed a bunch of different content creator folks, and I'm going to try to put that one out soon. And I'm also going to make a video that I didn't film anything there for it. What I did was instead I purchased things. I purchased a bunch of things. And I'm going to make a video about the things that I purchased and brought home. An Adepticon booty video, if you will. What kind of stuff did I get? I bought a bunch of models. I bought some models from Blacksite Studios, as a matter of fact, that I'm going to use for other things that I just thought were really cool looking, and I've never seen anything quite like them. So I'm like, I'll pick some of those things up. I bought some terrain, because try and stop me. Some stuff from Lasercraft Studios, some stuff from... I strangely didn't buy any terrain from Blacksite Studios. I was going to. They had a piece that they were showing off in their booth that was like the sign that, like, when you drive into Chernobyl, there's like this like super crazy like 1970s kind of Soviet sign, I think. And it's either for Chernobyl or the city next to Chernobyl. It starts with a P. Pripyat? Something like that?
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
And they had that there, and it was like, I didn't buy it fast enough. Like, they sold out of them like right away on Thursday, and I was like, oh, man. So, yeah, but that'll be great for... I've been wanting that sign for Zona Alpha game for a long time.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. The Pripyat sign.
Yeah, and it says like 1970 on it. Yep, that's the one.
That is a cool one.
So anyway, but I also bought some stuff, like I said, from Lasercraft. It was just, there was a decent amount of companies there that were selling 3D printed stuff, like 3D printed FDM terrain that looked really good. Like they've really got those printers dialed in.
Yeah,
which is really nice. So there was like some sort of like deserty kind of like pillar kind of rock terrain, and there was also some pools, and I know I can put those two things together and turn them into super cool, what do you call it? Like hellscape terrain for Rain and Hell, or all kinds of stuff. So I did that. I bought some other stuff for, also for terrain, like for, what do you call it? Embellishments for terrain. Like when you're building a piece of terrain, sometimes you want like a cool pile of skulls, or you want like a cool, dead body or something like that and stuff. So I got a bunch of stuff from Bad Squiddo Games. They were not there. I mean, Annie lives in the UK, and so she doesn't have a booth at Adepticon, but there's a company that's local to the United States that carries her stuff called Badger Games, and they always have her stuff at the conventions that we see them at. Mm-hmm. And we've seen them at a bunch of conventions locally, and so that was great to see them there and to be able to pick some stuff up. But yeah, that was it was a good time. I like I said, on Friday night we ran demos. Vince and I ran demos of Reign in Hell, and we had brought, I don't know, 25, 26 copies of the game and sold all those off as well to folks who were there at the demo.
Nice.
We had talked to the Adepticon folks and said, what do we need to do to make this like legal, so we're not just like, back alley selling the game out under the table and all that stuff. And we took care of all that, and it was fine. So that was great. It was great to see people and everything, and that was very cool. And then I came home and then kind of had a cold, and I'm still fighting it, but it's mostly gone now, so that's good.
Totally worth it, though.
Yeah, I think so. And then let's see, what else have I been doing? At one point this past weekend, I did get to work a little bit on painting some 3D printed figures that I've got for a secret project, which we'll be finding out more about sometime this summer. But I worked on some of those figures. They were models I got off of Etsy. And then I did miss a bit of Twitch, honestly. I didn't get to paint, obviously, on Twitch on Friday 2 weeks ago because I was at Adepticon. And then I came back, painted on Monday night last week, and then started getting ill, and then was unable to paint on Friday morning because, again, I didn't feel well. But I did get to paint again last night. So
nice.
And my nose didn't run the entire time, so that was good. So it was good to be back and working on the Skaven for Warcry. I'm looking forward to getting them finished and then moving over to the Khorne guys because I'm looking forward to doing more Warcry. I think that eventually I'm going to do some, what the heck is it called? Space Hulk this summer. But I think I'm going to be getting at least 1 to 2 more Warcry warbands done on Twitch first. So
nice.
Gosh, what else? Well, the survey, we finally closed the survey. We had 130 respondents,
nice.
I believe.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a lot of good feedback, and that I think there was some stuff that were like, it kind of confirmed some stuff that we had felt, and then I think there was, I don't know if there was anything that was a total surprise.
I don't think anything completely blew us away. I think that we were... there were some things that I looked at as far as in that GameFor survey. It was like, oh, I see. Okay, so like we kind of had a good idea what the features that people liked the most were, and then it was interesting to kind of see the feature that people used probably the least.
Yeah, I wasn't shocked by it, but
no.
I was.
But it
was interesting that it confirmed it.
Yeah, that's true. So. Yeah, so that was...
There probably somebody's right now going, and that feature was...
messaging, as it turns out, which...
It was funny because, when we first brought up that, we've got to have messaging in the app, I know that we had a lot of debate internally here of, that you already have like 10 things on your phone to
they can
talk
do
to
the
people.
Messaging, yeah.
Why do we need another? And,
I still think it's necessary.
Right.
Because if you want to do a looking for players and you want someone to reach out to you and say, hey, I'm interested in playing that game that you also like.
Right.
Let's get together at the local comic shop or whatever and play. You want that interaction to be done with the messaging in the system.
Right. Yeah, doing the...
I don't want to throw my phone number out there.
Right. Doing that initial contacts, the initial... Or like asking your, FLGS stuff, or any of that kind of stuff seems to make the most sense.
Now, I think that probably after that, like let's say you decided to start playing with this person frequently, then you're probably going to be messaging them via, whatever, iMessage or what, WeChat texting or WeChat, whatever you use.
Yep.
Is WeChat a thing? What the heck is WeChat?
So. Isn't it?
WhatsApp. Is that WhatsApp?
WhatsApp.
Anyway, but you'll be using probably something else once you start to make friends with a person or whatever. Like we get that, but we still think the messaging is sort of important, at least for that, like we said, the initial thing. So, but it did reiterate the fact that it's not necessarily going to set the world on fire and take over.
Right. We don't need to make a GameFor messaging app.
Right. Exactly. God forbid. That's for sure. But yeah, so so that was helpful, and that's going to help us to inform on the planning sessions we've got kind of coming up.
Right. They're going to kind of take like a Game Library Manager Pro edition. We're going to be talking kind of about what that might be. some specific store stuff that we reached out to several stores that wanted some specific items.
Like at Gamma, we had some conversations with some stores that gave us really some food for thought, frankly.
And had even some have been courteous enough to give us, or gracious enough, I don't know which way is the correct word, to give us some follow-up discussions too on some stuff. So we're looking at that, and then also, of course, the GameFor Proper, the main app.
Can we start calling it GameFor Proper?
We could.
Just proper. Anyway, but yeah, I know what you're talking about, and so those are all kind of moving forward. Gamma gave us a lot of information. The survey gave us a lot of information, and
now we can act.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say Adepticon gave us information. I don't know if I had any conversations. I might have had one conversation. Well, no. I had more than a couple of conversations about GameFor, short ones.
Yeah.
But at Adepticon. But there was more certainly at Gamma.
Yeah, absolutely more at Gamma. But yeah, there were a couple where people were asking me about some stuff. And then there was some stuff where some of the stuff we had come back with or had thoughts about. Yeah. I kind of ran it by some people and they were like, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. Or no one told me it was a dumb idea. So
well, that's probably good. For the best, yeah.
Not that was a dumb idea.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
I definitely had dumb
things.
ideas while I was there. But.
Well, so do we all. So when you're going out to a convention and you're out at a convention, or maybe you're in a store or you're someplace and you see a game, what makes you think about trying it out? What makes you interested in a tabletop game?
Right. Yeah. Like if friends like, hey, there's a new game, you got to try this out. What makes us go, oh, okay. So what made me think of this topic was, so I was standing over, I just got done doing the demo for Shattered Crown. I was back down near the Gaddis Gaming Studio booth and was talking to Dean, who had been helping run the booth while the demos were going on. And he starts talking to me about hey, did you see the Black Site Studio stuff? And then he starts explaining like, well, you got to check this one game out, and Don't Look Back, especially like he found out I liked horror movies, and then that kind of cascaded. And the next thing I know, he was leading me over there and saw a quick demo, and I 10 minutes later I was purchasing terrain and the game and everything else. So I'm like, whoa, like how did that happen? Like one, it's a convention, so that's just your wallet and
sometimes
and
at conventions. Yeah, that certainly can happen.
But what made me go, yeah, I think I should spend money on that, versus when I was walking down the dealer hall, there's some stuff where I stopped and learned more about the game, and then there was times I'm like, no, that's okay. I don't really want to know anything more about that game. Like that doesn't interest me.
It's a very personal thing. You can, as a game designer, and I can kind of speak to this, you can design something that you think is really super cool, and someone else can look at it and not trying to be mean or anything, but just be like, this is really, really not for me. They're not saying, oh, it's bad or whatever. Right. I mean, sometimes games are bad. That happens as well. But sometimes people like bad games too. So, bad games can sell. But it's really a very kind of personal thing. It's like, I think probably many other forms of media. There's just certain movies that you like or you don't like, and it's hard to put your finger on. There's certain books that are the same way, music, all kinds of different things. And sometimes it doesn't make any sense. You may love these 3 different pieces of music, and then you also love this band, which has nothing to do with anything. You're like, I love classical music, and I love, Bach, and I love... I don't know, the other ones and all that kind of stuff, sure. And then, but boy, I sure also do love Warrant. You remember Warrant from the 80s? You know what I mean? Cherry Pie, exactly. This is not a band I'm in.
Guar.
Right, oh, sure, yeah, why not?
I mean, Guar fan. Yeah.
So there can be like really strange different things in people's brains that make them prefer one thing over another, but...
Or not like something. There's times when I've said on more than one occasion, like, I should, on paper... like this game or
this game should be right up my street. Yeah, exactly.
But something is keeping me from liking it.
Right. And so we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what that what that does. Now, in this situation, to some degree that you just explained, you sort of had an advocate for the game,
right?
In Dean,
it wasn't. Yeah, and it was. There's times like when, especially at a convention, where it's the game designer or someone that's worked on the game quite heavily that kind of is advocating for it. But this time it was someone that had purchased the game and was excited about it and wanted to get other people involved.
Which we've talked about here on the podcast before, becoming a gaming advocate. Now, he did it in a different way to some degree. Normally, a gaming advocate sets up, gets like both sides of the game built and whatever and all that kind of stuff, or says, hey, this is this super cool board game, or this is a great RPG and you should try this out, and kind of convinces people to sit down and play it.
Right.
Dean just literally was like, this is a cool game, you should check it out, and then you kind of bought it, and that's. But again,
pretty much
you're at a convention, and these things go a little fast and loose sometimes.
Right.
So there's that.
Shooting fish in a barrel.
Right. But there's definitely, like, if you've got a friend and you have, like, interests which are similar, and this friend is like, this is a good game and you should definitely check it out, that is a very strong indicator to some degree.
Yeah, and the thing that, what I found that really kind of, like, the phrase that he used that kind of got me hooked was, the reason why I like it is because, and then he explained all the parts that like made him like the game and feel passionate enough to want to share. Well, this game does this really well, and it does this really cool.
What type of stuff was it? Was it like a lot of rules type things?
There was some rules stuff in it, but one, it was like, well, it's horror themed, and I don't think I've seen this before, so it was something new and different that I wasn't used to.
But it doesn't have like an in-depth lore to the game like some games do.
Yeah, it was like, he's like, oh yeah, it's a lightweight game. It's really fun and fast. You can play with your kids. It's campy.
Yeah.
It's, so it's got a really cool theme. They've got awesome terrain and pieces for it. And
yeah. I think that especially, again, if a friend knows the types of things that you like, either in theme or in, I know you don't like worker placement games, so I'm not going to suggest this game,
right?
And or whatever. That is a definite indicator on things like that. That's I don't want to say it's easy mode, but as as the people at Black Site Studios booth there, they were probably real glad to see him come over and sell you a game, and they didn't have to do anything, other than take the money, right?
Yeah, they're just like kind of like step back and like, okay, let's
let it rip. Yeah,
he's selling it, and like let's go for it.
Exactly. Like if a person walks up to the booth and is sort of like looking at the stuff, and then you're as a booth worker are like, hey, what kind of games do you like? Or hey, this is our game, and this you have like a higher hill to climb.
Absolutely.
Versus when someone else brings a friend in and goes, dude, and
it's kind of like Tender, like swiping left or right.
Sure, yeah.
Versus like, eHarmony, that's like, hey, you two should meet up because you're like good for one another.
I'm going to take your word on that. I haven't used either of those apps.
I'm just going by what the kids.
The kids these days. Yeah.
That's the ones that keep going on my front lawn.
Right. What do you mean they're going on your front lawn? That's not.
Oh,
I don't know.
Meddling kids.
You should be spraying them with a hose.
Yes.
Or maybe those aren't kids. But so yeah, it's interesting. Like and it is, again, like I said, it's almost easy mode when a friend says, "Hey, you should check this out." But what about games that you just stumble across? Not literally, but games that you come across at a convention, in a store, you find an article online, something like that. Yeah. Or you just even come across it, just a web page. Like there's a lot of things that can be in a game that can sometimes draw your attention, and I think that it's different for a lot of different people. And I think that sometimes you may not, as a game consumer, you may not even realize what things that you prefer.
Right.
Like I know the things that as I've been doing this a long time, I know the type of things that I'm looking for in games. But sometimes a game will just go completely outside of that wheelhouse as well. I'll just be like, well, I really like this game, but I have no good idea why. You know what I mean?
But yeah, like a theme, like I said, the horror theme was kind of like, oh, that's different.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a story, I know that like Gaddis games, the Shattered Crown, when he's like, oh, it's like War of the Worlds, but did this and that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I'm interested. Like I've watched documentaries and read the book and the movies and everything else. So I was like, oh, I like that. So like IP or themes that you enjoy, sometimes like walking by, like they've got that game, the Thing, that was based on John Carpenter's Thing,
the board game, yeah.
Or like the Fallout game, stuff like that. There's stuff that there's games that I later kind of go, no, it really wasn't for me. But that initial, like, oh, well, I like this property. Sometimes that can hook me in to go.
I think specifically in role playing games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, role playing games are very, very, very much about story.
Oh, absolutely.
So you can. I know that there are times when you'll be like, I love this role-playing game because I love the world that it takes place in, but I hate the rules and it drives me insane. Like, that can happen. But very frequently, I think that, at least to some degree, role-playing games, they try to get the rules to sort of be, I don't want to say background, but like not forefront and in your face. They want the rules to be a little bit more simpler so that the storytelling becomes more important.
Right. Yeah,
I've seen
a lot
story.
More. Yeah, a lot more times now you're seeing the rule sets of like, hey, if the rules don't make sense in a certain situation, go by the thing that's going to make this bad.
Exactly. But there are also people, and it depends on the game, that are like, I will buy any game that seems like it is either about the Aliens like movie franchise or is even adjacent to it. You know, maybe they don't have the licensing, but they made they made a game that's like Aliens, so I'm interested. Or they made there is an Aliens RPG now that's a licensed product and stuff like that. And I've heard good things about it, but let's say it wasn't particularly to your liking in the rules. There are still people that are like, but I'm still going to play it because it's about aliens, and that so. That's an interesting kind of thing. I personally seem to run along the lines of I will generally, for me, rules are a little bit more important than story. Theme is important, but there's a difference between theme and story. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of story in games like Warhammer and in games, like RPGs and miniature games the most. Board games, not so much, I don't think. There's a lot of story to collectible card games like Magic the Gathering and stuff like that, but it's not really something that you need to get invested in as much as you do in RPGs and I think miniature games.
Well, sometimes I feel like, like the lore can actually even sometimes get in the way of enjoying a game. I know we were talking about that the other day where, sometimes the rivet counters that are getting into the, Star Wars Expanded Universe,
right? Yeah,
book 2583.
Well, exactly.
Chapter 4 says
this is what happened in the book, and you're like, this is all fake, right? This is all written by like different people and whatnot. It's like it's not like I can understand being very specific about history because history happened,
right?
But there are people out there that are just as specific about the lore of their game.
They're like, that person wasn't chronicling it; they made that up.
Yeah, they made that up. They were probably drinking while they were doing it. I don't know, maybe not. But it's. I don't know. It is interesting. Like for me, theme can definitely be an attractant. Like any kind of alternate history. I'm all of a sudden just like, I'm interested. But then sometimes it doesn't work and doesn't hold me, and other times it does. And so it's hard to say. But actual like, there's like 28 different novels for this. I'm already like, I don't. Because I frequently want to make my own story. I might start from a jumping off point of the theme of the game, but I want to make my own story.
Yeah, I want the sandbox. I don't want the rails.
Exactly. That's a very good point. So that's a big thing that can draw people in, though. Definitely people will walk by a game on a shelf and look at it and go, oh, this is about robots? I love robots. Or, oh, this is about tulips? I love tulips. You know what I mean? Like there's like plenty of like board games out there that you could take the fact that it's about the tulip trade in the 1800s in Denmark, and you could rip that part out. I mean, honestly, there's a game about that.
I know there is.
You could rip that part of the game out and put in something about, I don't know, robots and aliens or whatever, and the game mechanics in many situations with some tweaking could be pretty much the same. But that's why there's generally themes in games.
Right, and there's themes that, like, like I said, on paper, I should be like an anime fan. Like I should like that stuff.
Yeah, I should probably enjoy anime too, but for some reason it doesn't stick with me.
And then if I see a game that's anime based, I usually it's very, very, very hard for me to have any interest in it at all. Like
just a personal thing. I don't know if it's an age thing. I mean, I know there's anime fans who are our age. So
I
don't know what it is. Yeah. I mean, I liked when I was a kid. I liked Voltron and. Robotech. That's kind of I think those are kind of anime.
I think so.
So I don't know. Yeah, we're making ourselves look very old here. That's fine. But yeah, theme and story in a game, which is really interesting because games aren't really. I mean, well, I was going to say games aren't really about theme or story, but they are, you know. Sure, there are games out there that have nothing to do with theme or story, you know. Go, I'm pretty sure the game Go with just the white and the black pips or whatever, there's not a story to hunt. But even in like chess, you got like, oh, this one's a knight, and oh, this one's the queen. You know what I mean?
Battles.
Like, yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. Sometimes games will attract attention, I think, because they're like this game, but this is different. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's, again, a theme thing. This game is like Aliens, but except that this is going on, or this is going, you know, or whatever.
Right.
But on the other hand, it could be this is a game that's very much got a rule set like this, but they changed it in this way.
Or it's the same thing, but they don't use this mechanic. Like,
sure, yeah. If there's a thing that you don't like too, you're like,
Star Wars. Why am I just completely blanking on the Star Wars
Legion?
Nope, the ship game.
Oh, Star Wars X-Wing.
X-Wing.
Yeah.
Wow. I initially enjoyed it, but then got really sick of the capture the cards, and
card chase,
magic, the gathering, building the perfect set. That part bugged me. So when I found out about Wings of War, even though I like space planes,
now I think called Wings of Glory.
Wings of Glory, yes.
Yeah.
I like space planes probably better than World War I planes.
Sure. But there was no deck building.
There's no deck. It's like the mechanics I liked better, and I have more fun playing that game.
Exactly. I mean, that was the reason you and I were playing Keyforge, because it was like Magic the Gathering, sort of, except it did not. There was no deck building because the decks are already pre-built and you can't change them because of the way the game is designed.
Right.
And the other thing is there's no mana.
Right.
So you don't have to be pulling out mana and stuff like that. It's done differently in that game, which is very cool.
Yeah, the game kind of starts off a little bit faster. You don't feel like there's that initial build
up of mana and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's cool too. And that can definitely you'd be like, I wish I liked this game, but I really don't. Oh, well, it's like this game, but except that we took out this thing or we added this thing. Yeah. And those little things in the rules very frequently can also help to, I think, attract specifically me to a game. Like I said, I probably wouldn't have bought Keyforge because I'm like, oh, it's another collectible card game, except it's kind of not, sort of, but it sort of is.
Right.
And it made some changes to Magic that I'm like, oh, these are great. So then I was into it. And it just kind of makes sense that way, too. Artwork and layout and the visual design is obviously a big deal, too, in many people's minds. Especially when we're talking about, it catching your eye on the shelf.
Right.
You know what I mean? But again, being a convention, sometimes you walk by a booth that's set up real cool, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on in there, and you're going to be like, well, what's this all about? Yeah. And that kind of presentation can really help. And other times you might be walking past an amazing game that is right up your alley.
Right.
But you can't tell because it's...
Yeah, there's been many times, especially like Gamma, where you sometimes have people that they're independent. They just came up with this idea. So they have a banner that they use some I wouldn't say Image Ready or Microsoft Paint almost.
Sure, right. Yeah.
To design their banner where you're like, okay, there's a bunch of clip art thrown together, and you're like, oh, okay. So right off the bat, you're like, I don't know.
But on the other hand, there are also sometimes games that are gorgeous looking and are like just garbage. Terrible. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So we've talked in the past on an episode here about game presentation, how important is it? And it is pretty important because it can definitely draw your eye. That's the whole point.
Right.
Especially if you're getting into the indie stuff like I'm into, cover will really that's what, when you're looking at Drive Through RPG, Wargame Vault, one of those types of places, an ugly cover, just immediately you're like, nope, not going to click on that.
Right.
I don't know.
That person didn't spend enough time on that, so they probably didn't spend enough time on the inside.
And that's the thing, is it's not necessarily true. The rules could be absolutely amazing, but they didn't. They're great at rules, but terrible at layout, terrible at visuals or art direction or whatever, and so it's not going to draw the attention, unfortunately. On the other hand, you can have a game that's got great. I mean, that cover is so clickable, you know, and you're like, oh, I got to go check that out,
Right.
and then you're like, oh, this isn't actually a very good game.
Yeah,
I mean,
like, what? Oh.
it's something to be wary of, to be perfectly honest. But it is definitely something that can draw people in, I think, into those things.
Components, models, like there's that's kind of on that same line. Like I know, like Cthulhu Death May Die. I think
Oh yeah, you got all those cool Cthulhu dudes
like
in there
that,
and stuff like that.
Like the game mechanics and stuff like that kept me into the game, but seeing the initial models was what made me go, ooh.
Well, you enjoyed the game,
check.
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you bought it, I think, didn't
Yes.
you? Yeah.
But like those models, when I saw the models come out, I'm like, oh, cool.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
this is awesome. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, and the game is really fun to play? Okay.
And that's why I think so many board games specifically these days have gone real heavy into miniatures, because seeing, especially if it's a Kickstarter, seeing all the cool miniatures you're going to get with this game is just something that just pokes you directly in the lizard brain and is just like, you should really buy this. Like, really, I can't imagine you not wanting to, you know, do the Kickstarter on this or whatever. and that's
Especially
a big
if
deal.
you're going to get the, you know, a 243rd mini.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if you do the Kickstarter,
if you do it
you'll get this special, you know, FOMO mini,
I
and
think
that'll be great.
I think Kickstarters are basically like our generation's like infomercials.
Oh yeah, no,
Like,
that's
wait, if you act now,
If you act now,
you can get 2 ShamWows.
Yeah, that's true. No, you're not
And
wrong.
free
You're not
shipping.
wrong. Yeah. Well, not free shipping, God forbid. But yeah, definitely. That's a good point. It is funny to see. You know, the FOMO on that stuff is interesting. I was just talking to someone about this recently, about how, like, you know, you pull the trigger and you buy this and you're like, awesome, and then like 2 years later you get this giant box and you're like, oh no, what have I done? You know, and
mistakes for me.
yeah, exactly. But those models in those board games, they definitely bring, you know, people to the yard, as it were. And miniatures there's a lot of people out there who play miniature games not because the rules are any good, but because they love the miniatures. And there's also people out there who play miniature games not because the rules are any good, but because they love the story. You know what I mean? Or maybe they love a combination of both, and that's great too. I personally want the rules to be good, and I'll figure out miniatures and story later on, but that's my personal preference. But I'm not going to like look away from an awesome looking miniature, don't get me wrong.
And you can find a game sometimes that you can make that miniature work.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like right now, you know, Games Workshop just announced these new like basically space dwarves, you know, the squats that have been, you know, they've been not discontinued. They're basically kind of written out of the story of Warhammer 40,000 for like 20 years or longer, 25 years maybe, and now they're bringing them back. And I just like the look of the one model that they've showed so far, and I'm like, I'm going to definitely use him in something cool. I'm going to use models like that in other games. I'm not going to necessarily use them in 40K because I'm not really playing 40K, but so I'll do that. But I'm sure there are folks out there who are like, well, now I have to play 40K because I want to play those miniatures. And I'm like, you can use those miniatures in whatever you want.
Nonsense.
Little secret. I know, it's true. But it's so, but those types of things definitely do draw your eye and get you, you know, interested in things. And I do think, frankly, and I know that this isn't sometimes hard to see, especially when you're walking by on the shelf, but well done rules and mechanics, I think, do draw. I do feel it's a smaller crowd, but I do feel that there's a decent amount of people who, specifically in board games, who are like, I kind of don't care whether this is about tulips or robots, but it's a good such and such style game.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I enjoy the structure of it.
I think that's what got me into kind of those Euro games. I mean, those are usually very abstract.
Yeah,
It was like, at the time, it was like, I haven't played any game that's like this.
Right, exactly.
You know, like worker placement, I had never played a worker placement, or you know,
Area control and all kinds of stuff.
resource management,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And like, you know, yes, we're just pushing cubes or meeples around, but holy cow, it's really making me use some logic and thinking and stuff like that. That's
and with miniature games, I definitely appreciate a really smart, strong rule set that can kind of get out of the way of the gameplay, but also still simulate, you know, like
realistic situation.
Not even simulate realistic, but like simulate to some degree like what's going on in the battle. I had this conversation at Adepticon where I was explaining the difference between Rain and Hell's activation system, where you're rolling a d12 for every demon that's currently in your cabal, and then ordering them that way, and your opponent's doing the same, and now the both of you can kind of look across the table from each other. I can see that you're going to be moving 2 guys before I get to move my first guy, and that kind of stuff. And every turn it changes, but it's known. Whereas in a game like Bolt Action, you're reaching into a dice bag every activation to pull out and see who goes next, and that's simulating the fog of war because there's explosions and smoke and you don't know what's going on. But in a hand-to-hand combat game, you can see what's going on, but the tides can change. And the person I was telling was just like, I've never even thought about that before. And I'm like, that's what the designer's thinking about. They're like, I want to simulate this effect. How do I do that in the game? And, whereas other games are just like, well, we'll both roll a die and see who gets to go first. I mean, that's a little different.
Yeah,
and stuff.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's times when, you're like, well, why am I rolling a die here?
Yeah, exactly. Why is this happening? Well, because it's this type of fight, and therefore we're trying to simulate and give it. We're not, like, again, simulation's a word that sometimes gets us into trouble, but that's.
But yeah, if there's like a, to portray the electricity that's coming off of this thing, you need to roll this.
Sure,
thing,
yeah.
You need to look at this, then you're like, oh, okay. Now
it's when the rules are like, well, why did I have to roll a third time to simulate this thing or whatever? That kind of stuff. And you're just like, I don't know. And it's like, well, because it's Space Marines and we love Space Marines. Okay, cool. That's great. But, so the rules are important. They're more important in certain types of games, miniatures, board games, even collectible card games, obviously. But like, I think in, like we were talking about before, RPGs, it's a little bit less important because it's a little bit more, we're just going to tell the story.
Right,
and
the story can just
are,
kind of override a lot of stuff.
Exactly. So that's a benefit too. I mean, I think even sometimes designers, like if you love a game by this designer and then that designer makes another game, there's a good chance you may dig that too.
Yeah.
Not always.
No, right. But yeah, I know, like video games, Sid Meier puts his name and Civilization on a game.
Sure, right, yeah.
I'm buying the darn game, even though I don't need to, but I'm going to.
Oh, yeah, no. My wife has played, like for video games, she's played, I think from Civ 3 on, and she plays them all the time.
Yeah, I've started since, so friend's older brother had the original, and then I bought Civ 2, and then I've played every version since, Colonization Beyond Earth, and then all the other ones. And then every time it's like, oh, well, this does everything I want it to do, so I don't need another version.
Exactly.
Like, but this version does.
But this one has.
This has Gandhi in it as well.
This one has Gandhi in it, and he's a real jerk. And you're like, oh, okay, all right, let's do that. Gandhi is a jerk, though, in those games.
Yes.
He's mean. My wife tells me that all the time. But yeah, definitely a designer can, or a company, like if you like everything that a company's ever made, well, if they make another thing, you're probably going to look at it. You know what I mean? That's something to also be considerate of, because maybe sometimes they will not necessarily, they can't all be bangers. You know what I mean? Like, so.
Right.
Yeah, that can
But you're like, oh, but, hey, if they're using this, or a lot of times they'll use that same mechanic. Like I think I talked about the new G.I. Joe game from Renegade. It's using the mechanics from Power Rangers that I liked.
Yeah.
But using a theme that I like.
Right, because you watched G.I. Joe, you didn't really watch Power Rangers.
So I'm like, okay, you're taking two awesome things and putting them together like peanut butter and chocolate.
So you got theme and you've got rules that you like. I mean, that's the thing too, is looking at all these things we've been talking about. It's when a game has multiples of these things that you enjoy that it really kind of sets the hook.
Yeah, then my wallet just like drains itself.
It's unfortunate. I agree. Well, I hope this made some sense to you folks, and maybe you take some time and you think about like what things are the things that draw you to a game, so that you can, better search out games that you're going to enjoy that would fit your classifications, and also maybe filter out some games that you're like, well, just because this company made this thing, that's cool, and I like the stuff they've done in the past, but I hate this and this and this about it, or whatever, that makes you be a little bit more tactical in your gaming acquisitions.
Yes.
Wow, I used a lot of big words there. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player, or just aren't into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.